there's one thing on there that I have to do it, and I only have one thing to do both of them, but like nowhere in the syllabus does it explain.
Okay, everybody, so let's start. Our first lecture topic is the blood. First, we'll see how to define blood. What is blood? Then we'll talk about properties of the blood, general information. Then we'll talk about the functions, composition, then how to separate different components of blood. Then we'll talk about the plasma and formed elements. Now, blood consists of two things. The liquid part is called the plasma and solid part is called the formed elements. So, we'll talk about the liquid part, which is the plasma, and the solid part, which is the formed element. Then we'll talk about different types of blood cells. In your blood, you have three types of cells: red blood cells or RBC, white blood cells or WBC, and platelets, also called thrombocytes. So those are three types of blood cells. So we'll talk about the red blood cells today, and in next class we'll talk about other blood cells, white blood cells and platelets. Okay? So, what is blood? Blood is a special type of connective tissue that circulates throughout the body within a closed system. So you see here, what type of tissue blood is? Connective tissue, right? Special type of connective tissue. Why blood is a connective tissue? Because blood comes from the embryonic tissue that is called mesenchyme. So mesenchyme is an embryonic tissue from where all different types of connective tissue come. You must remember different types of connective tissue. In ANP1, right, you looked at different types of connective tissue. So you already know, let me just quickly remind. Fats are connective tissue, bones are connective tissue, cartilages are connective tissue. All these are connective tissue, and blood is a connective tissue too. You must remember this classification. Now, why all these belong to connective tissue, although they are totally different from each other, right? Blood is totally different from bones and cartilages and fats. Because they all come from what?
Mesenchyme.
Mesenchyme. So, that's why blood is a connective tissue. Now, why special type? Because you see, these are in solid form, right? But this is the only connective tissue which is in liquid form. That's why we say special type. It circulates, moves throughout the body. And circulates within a closed system. What is the closed system? Your cardiovascular system. Blood circulates inside the cardiovascular system, right? Not outside. That means inside the heart and the blood vessels. Vascular. Make sense? So, blood circulates within that closed system, which is the cardiovascular system. Properties of blood. Color. Blood is red. We all know that, right? But arterial blood and venous blood is slightly different in color. Arterial blood is bright red. Venous blood is dark or bluish red. Now you tell me, why arterial blood is bright red? Because
Oxygen?
of the presence of oxygen. When your hemoglobin binds with oxygen, it gives bright color, red color, okay? Oxyhemoglobin. Why venous blood is dark red? Because of carbon dioxide is there. pH of blood. Blood is slightly alkaline. What is neutral pH? Anybody?
7.
7. So 7 is neutral, and if it is higher than 7, that is alkaline, right? Below 7 is what? Acidic. If your blood is acidic, is it good? No. So blood is slightly alkaline, which is safe. Even if the pH drops a little bit, still it is kind of safe. It will not become too acidic. So 7.35 to 7.45. That is slightly above 7, right? Slightly alkaline. Temperature is 38 degrees Celsius, which is slightly warmer than the body temperature. So blood is slightly warm. Viscosity. Just know that viscosity indicates thickness and stickiness. So blood viscosity is high. That means it is thicker than water. 4 to 5 times thicker than water. Volume of blood. In adult male body, the total volume of blood is 5 to 6 liters. In adult female, the volume is 4 to 5 liters. Why the blood volume or amount of blood is more in male body?
Bigger.
Very good. Bigger, that means more blood vessels, right? In the body. That is number one. Number two, in male body, male body is more muscular. Not always. Okay? But in general, right? Than female. Female body has more fat. So, muscle tissue has more blood than fat. Make sense? So, because of those two factors, the volume of blood, total volume in male body is more. Bigger body size and more muscles, and muscle tissue has more blood vessels. Functions. In one word, if you want to indicate the function of the blood, it is transportation. Make sense? If I ask you, tell me in one word, what is the function of the blood? Transportation. Blood circulates, right? 24 hours throughout the body. To do what? To transport. Now the question is, transport of what? Blood transports many things, right? Can you name a couple of those? Blood transports what?
Oxygen.
Oxygen as well as carbon dioxide. Nutrients.
Proteins.
Nutrients. Yeah, protein, carbohydrates, fats, right? All those are nutrients. So blood transports gases, oxygen, carbon dioxide, right? Nutrients, you said. And metabolic toxic chemicals to the kidneys. So What are the toxic chemicals?
Waste.
Metabolic wastes, including carbon dioxide, right? Should be expelled out. Most of the toxic chemicals are taken by the blood to the kidneys, right? And you know that through urine they get out from the body, right? So blood takes the metabolic wastes to the kidneys and carbon dioxide to the lung. Blood also transports hormones, antibodies. Make sense? Hormones, antibodies. So many things are transported by the blood. Number 2, regulation of pH. In your blood, you have buffer. Those are called blood buffers. Buffers keep the pH unchanged. If you have any chemistry background, also in NP1 I mentioned that buffers try to do what? Keep the pH unchanged. Will not let the pH change. So inside your blood you have buffers. Those are called blood buffers. What are the blood buffers? Important blood buffers are phosphate buffers, bicarbonate buffer, another buffer is called protein buffer. So these are important buffers present in the blood. So they try to keep the pH 7.35 to 7.45. Okay? It is very important, right? As I told you, if the pH of blood drops, your body will be acidic. Make sense? If the pH goes down. So these buffers will not let that happen. Okay? Which is good. Coagulation is blood clot formation. So blood clot is very helpful when you get a cut, right? To stop what? Bleeding. Blood clot is helpful to stop bleeding. Make sense? Which is good. But this property could be harmful too, right? If blood clots inside the blood vessel, inside your coronary artery, right? That can cause death even. So anyway, so this is a function. If we think the good function of clot, it seals the cut and stops bleeding. Defense. Two components of your blood mainly protects your body against antigens. What are those two? One is white blood cells in your blood and another is antibodies, proteins. So these are two components of your blood that gives immunity, ability to fight against the microorganisms or antigens. Body temperature, regulation of body temperature. If your body temperature increases, what happens? The blood vessels in your skin, body surface, dilate. Okay? So, when blood vessels in your body surface or skin dilate, then what happens? More blood circulates the body surface. Make sense? So more blood flows in the body surface or skin, and that helps to release the heat out from the body. Make sense? So from the blood, it will easily get out of the body. So that lowers the body temperature. Helps in excretion of toxics. As I have mentioned, blood circulates, transports metabolic wastes, ammonia, urea, uric acid. Those are the main toxic chemicals produced in the body by metabolism. Urea, uric acid, ammonia, carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is taken to the lung, right, to expel out, and others are taken to the kidneys to excrete through the urine. Okay, so those are the important functions of your blood. Now, composition of blood. Blood, as I have already mentioned, you remember, two components. Blood has two components. The liquid part is called what? Plasma, and solid part is called the formed elements. Remember that I mentioned? Okay. So those are the two main components of your blood. Now, we can easily separate those two components of blood. How? If you put blood in a glass tube, if you get a glass tube like this and put blood here, okay, and centrifuge, spin the blood for 3 to 5 minutes. That you will do, I hope, in the lab today. What happens? The blood cells go to the bottom, settle in the bottom of the test tube like this. All blood cells will go to the bottom, and the liquid part will go to the top. Okay, so we can separate those two components by centrifugation. And after you do that, if you measure the volume of this and this part, if this is 100 milliliter, 100 milliliter, this will be about 55 milliliter, and this will be about 45 milliliter. Okay, that means 45% is the formed elements and 55% is the plasma. So this is the liquid part, plasma, okay, and this is the formed elements. Okay, now formed elements are the blood cells. How many different types of blood cells you have?
3.
3. Remember I mentioned red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets, right? Remember, the number of red blood cells is much higher than white blood cells and platelets. The number of red blood cell is many times more than the white blood cells. About 99% of this formed element is given by the red blood cells. White blood cells only give about 1% of volume of this 45. So the reason is the number of red blood cell is many more than the white blood cells. So 99% of this value of formed elements come from the red blood cells. Only 1% that forms a thin layer here, that is called buffy coat. Buffy coat. You will see a thin line here. That is given by the white blood cells and platelets. So that is how we separate two components of the blood. And this volume of formed elements is called hematocrit. So hematocrit is just the volume of the blood cells. Hematocrit. Okay, in this case, which is 45%. Make sense? In your blood, it could be 40%. Someone's blood could be 48, 49, 50%. Okay, the range within the range it varies. Okay. Now, this plasma or liquid part is mainly water. About 92% volume of plasma is water. You also have proteins and other chemicals. Okay? So plasma is mainly water. Plasma is mainly what? Water. But it also has proteins. Those are called plasma proteins. Proteins in the plasma, right? Plasma proteins. And other solids, other chemicals, small amount. So here you see water, proteins, and other solids. Make sense? That is the composition of plasma part. Yes.
What did you say the hematocrit was again?
Hematocrit is the volume, this volume of formed elements.
Okay.
Okay. Is it clear? Now if I ask you, hematocrit is mainly given by which type of blood cells? Red blood cells. 99% of it, right? So that's why in some textbooks you see they have defined the hematocrit as the volume, percent volume of red blood cells in the blood. Since white blood cells and platelets give like 1% volume, they ignore it. But I would prefer to say that it is the volume of formed elements, percent volume of formed elements in the blood. Now if I ask you which type of blood cells give 99% volume of hematocrit, that is what? The red blood cells. Is it clear? Okay. So that's the composition of the blood. Now, plasma proteins. Proteins in the plasma or liquid part. 3 types of plasma proteins are very important. There are more than 3, but 3 you need to know. Those are very important. Albumins, globulins, and fibrinogens. We'll talk about that. Just see here, this one. This is blood that I showed you. If you separate 2 components, plasma and formed elements, they are shown here. And plasma consists of water, plasma proteins, and other solids. And formed elements formed by 3 types of blood cells: red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets. Now, proteins. 3 types of plasma proteins are important: albumins, globulins, and fibrinogens or fibrinogens. I'll just mention 1 or 2 functions of each, and you have to remember that. Okay? So, plasma proteins include albumins, globulins, and fibrinogens. Okay? Albumins are mainly responsible for colloid osmotic pressure. Colloid osmotic pressure. That is the main function of albumins. Now, I'm sure you are thinking, what is that? Colloid osmotic pressure, right? Colloid osmotic pressure is the pressure that tries to keep the blood inside the center part of the blood vessel. Like when blood flows, this pressure tries to keep the blood towards the center. Towards what?
The center.
The center. Will prevent outward force of blood. So you see here, this is a blood vessel, right? Blood flows this way, right? So this pressure tries to keep everything towards the center. Okay? So the flow will be better. Make sense? So that is the function of colloid osmotic pressure. In certain diseases, the colloidal osmotic pressure of albumin, because of lack of albumin, the colloidal osmotic pressure is lost. Okay? Because albumin synthesis stops or decreases. Like liver is the source of albumin. Okay? So if someone has liver cirrhosis or liver disease, that will stop production of albumin or decrease production of albumin. Then what will happen? Colloidal osmotic pressure will go down. Make sense? Because of lack of albumin. So what happens in that case? Blood tries to get out this way. Okay? Force is towards the wall. Make sense? So some liquid from the blood will come out from the blood vessel. Make sense? So fluid will accumulate. That fluid comes out from the blood. Okay? Edema can occur. So very important, right? Colloidal osmotic pressure to keep everything inside the blood vessel, not let it get out. Okay? Globulins, the main function is immunity. So globulins give immunity or defensive function. Why? Because globulin is actually antibodies. Antibodies come from globulin. You must remember a few minutes ago I said 2 things in your blood help in defensive function, fighting against microorganisms. White blood cells and antibodies. Remember that? So antibodies are globulins.
It makes antibodies or it is an
One
antibody?
type of globulin is antibody. Okay? Then fibrinogens. This one has a very important function too. What is that function? Blood clot formation. Blood clot. Okay? So that stops bleeding. So you see, those are the main functions of the plasma proteins: albumins, globulins, fibrinogens. Okay? Another function of albumins and globulins, these two, is transportation. Transportation. Albumins and globulins help also in transporting certain chemicals. Bind with certain chemicals and transport them. So that is the function. So if in your exam I ask you, tell me the functions of those 3 plasma proteins, you must be able to answer. I didn't mention too many things, very specific, so you should remember that. Sources of plasma protein or origin of plasma protein. More than 90% plasma proteins come from the liver. You remember I said in liver disease, right? Albumin production will go down. So liver is the main source of plasma proteins. Small amount of antibodies, that means globulins, come from one type of cells called plasma cells. So plasma cells produce small amount of globulins or antibodies. So those are main sources. Liver is the main one. Now, I'll talk about the blood cells. Blood cells are red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Red blood cells are also called RBC or erythrocytes. The word erythro means red color, cyte means cell, right? You remember cyte is cell. So red colored cells are red blood cells. Why red blood cells are red? Because of hemoglobin inside. Hemoglobin is a red pigment, okay? Red colored pigment. That's why red blood cells are red. Why blood is red? Because of red blood cells, okay? Why red blood cells are red? Because of hemoglobin. Why blood is red? Because of red blood cells. Make sense? You remember I said red blood cell number is much higher than other blood cells, right? So that gives the color of the blood. Okay. White blood cells are also called leukocytes. Leuko means white, cyte is cell. And platelets are also called thrombocytes. Platelets are also called thrombocytes. Okay? So those are three types of blood cells. Function. Red blood cells transport oxygen and carbon dioxide. Red blood cell is mainly responsible for the transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Inside the red blood cell, why red blood cell is red? Again, hemoglobin, right? And that hemoglobin of red blood cell mainly binds with the oxygen and transport the oxygen. White blood cells, I have already mentioned, two components of blood are responsible for defense, right? One is white blood cell and another antibodies or globules. So white blood cells are mainly responsible for fighting against the antigens, defensive function or immune function. Platelets help in blood clot formation. Helps in what? Clot formation. Now you got two things in your blood that helps in blood clot formation. One is platelet, right? One type of blood cells. Another is what? Fibrinogen, plasma protein. Make sense? So those are two things help in blood clot formation. Platelets, blood cells, and plasma protein. Which one? Fibrinogens. Is it clear? Okay.
It says it's not really a cell, but it's not really.
Yes, there is a debate that if we should consider the platelets as blood cells. Although we say platelets are blood cells, but many physiologists, they don't want to include platelets as blood cells. Why? Because platelets don't have most of the components of a typical cell. No nucleus, no mitochondria. Basically, almost all organelles are absent in the platelets. We'll talk about that. Just know that. That's why many physiologists, they say platelets are not cells. But in general, we still say that platelets are one type of blood cells, although they don't have those organelles present inside. Okay, so those are three types of blood cells and their functions. Now I'll talk about the red blood cells, or RBC, or erythrocytes. Red blood cells are red because of hemoglobin inside it. Shape. Red blood cells are round but flattened. Flat. It is not spherical. And the outer part of the red blood cell is thick and center part is thin. It looks like a donut, but donut usually has a hole inside, most of the donut side, but this one has a thin membrane in the center, but outer part is thick. So flattened, round cells. Why the red blood cells are flat, not like this, not round, spherical, but flat, round but flat, because nucleus is not present in the red blood cell. No nucleus in the mature red blood cell. Hemoglobin is present inside, and the flattened red blood cells have some advantages. What are those? Number one, you see here, if this is a capillary, blood capillary, red blood cell is flattened. So if it was round, then so these red blood cells are flat. So look at this. This is from the side, red blood cell, and this is hemoglobin inside. And this is outside of the cell. And we know that hemoglobin binds with oxygen, okay, or oxygen binds with hemoglobin. So the membrane of the cell and the hemoglobin come very close to each other because it is flat. Make sense? If the red blood cell was spherical, like this, like a soccer ball, and this is the hemoglobin inside it, you see the distance from the membrane to the hemoglobin, right? So in this case, the oxygen can easily get out and get in. Make sense? Because of flattened structure, the hemoglobin is very close to the cell membrane, okay? And you know that oxygen should get in and out, right? So quickly it can get attached to the hemoglobin and quickly can leave the cell. That is number one. Number two, the diameter of a capillary is smaller than the diameter of a red blood cell. So red blood cells are slightly bigger than the diameter of the capillary. So what happens, because of the flattened shape, the red blood cells can easily get folded. You know, if I give you a soccer ball filled with air, you cannot fold it, right? Because it is spherical. Now if I take the air out, then it gets what? You can squeeze it, right? So exactly same thing here, okay? Since it is flat, you can easily, it can easily get, squeezed and pass through the capillaries, okay? So narrow capillaries, through narrow capillaries, red blood cells can pass because of the flattened shape. It can get folded. So those are two important advantages of having flattened shape. So when you see the blood cells under the microscope in your lab, you will see the red blood cells look like this. Exactly, you will see this. Okay, under the microscope. So these are red blood cells. Here, there is no white blood cells because I told you white blood cells are few, very few compared to the red blood cells. Of course, you will see most of the cases we see 1, 2, 3 white blood cells and this many red blood cells. Here, no white blood cells, but these are platelets. You see the tiny dots? Platelets are very small fragment of cells. Okay. You see, as I have mentioned, that outer part is thicker, inner part is thin. The center part is thin. Okay. Now, anybody, can you just think and tell me? You see these red blood cells, the center is bright white. Why is that? What do you think?
Nucleus? It's the nucleus or?
There's no nucleus in
No.
it.
There's no nucleus.
Because it's so thin that the light can easily pass through it, and there's no nucleus.
That is the most appropriate. Okay, so when you see something flat under a microscope, right, you pass light from the bottom, right? You know that. So outer part is thick, so less light can pass through that part, right? Center part is thin, so more light passes through that. That's what he said, right? So that part looks bright because light can easily pass through that part, center part. There is a property of red blood cells that is called rouleau formation. What is rouleau? Rouleau is the property of red blood cell that red blood cells can get stuck together, piled together and form columns like this inside the blood vessels. You know, when you go to a big dinner party, okay, you see the plates are together, right? Stuck together. So the red blood cells are flat, right? Round flat, like flat plates, dinner plates. So they get attached to each other like this easily, right? And form columns inside the blood vessels. So we often see the red blood cells form columns, get attached to each other and form columns. Those are called rouleau, you see here. The count of red blood cells. The number is very high, right? Remember? Number is what? Very high. So in 1 microliter of blood, that is a very small amount of blood, right? Microliter of blood. If you count the red blood cells in adult male, it is 4.5 to 6.3 million. Okay? It's very high in 1 microliter of blood. In adult female body blood, in 1 microliter, the number of red blood cell is 4.2 to 5.5 million. So less than male. In children, if you count the red blood cell in children, the number is much higher than male and female. Much higher. Now you tell me, why the count of red blood cell is, number of red blood cell is more in adult male than female?
More muscles.
Or capillaries or more vessels, right?
More vessels will give more volume, but here, think here, we have taken same volume, so we are not carrying the amount of blood in the body, right? We have taken 1 microliter from male, 1 microliter from female. So now the volume doesn't matter because same amount of blood I have taken from male and female, 1 microliter. But the number is here, more here, less here.
Because men are larger usually, so they need more oxygen to flow, or?
Yes. Number one, male, as I have mentioned before, more muscular, right? So muscle has more metabolism than fat, right? So more metabolism needs more oxygen. So requirement is more in male body. Make sense? So that makes sense? So because of muscles, more metabolism, so needs more oxygen.
Why do kids have more?
They have a high metabolism too.
Yeah, that's why.
And they're growing,
growing,
so there's
yes.
more.
Yes,
requirement.
children, kids are growing, right? Growing body needs more metabolism, much more metabolism than adults. Make sense? Because new tissue is being formed. Cell division is going on, right? So you need more oxygen. That is another factor. Why adult male has more? The male sex hormone testosterone. Male sex hormone testosterone that stimulates the bone marrow to produce red blood cells. So that is another factor why the number is high in male.
Stimulates the what?
Testosterone to produce bone.
Bone marrow.
So bone marrow.
Okay. Now the stem cell for the blood cells are called hemocytoblasts. Hemocytoblast. Hemo means blood, cyto means cell, and blast are premature young cells. So hemocytoblasts are the stem cells for all types of blood cells, and they are present in the bone marrow. The term hematopoiesis indicates the production of blood cells. Hematopoiesis. Poiesis indicates production. Remember, poiesis is production. So hematopoiesis is the production of the blood cells. And blood cells come from the stem cells called the hemocytoblast. Now, we know that red bone marrow is the site, right? Primary site for blood cells. Where the red blood cells, red bone marrow is present. We know that red bone marrow is found inside the bones, right? You know that? When you eat chicken leg, you see inside the bone marrow. So, in early stage of life, just know this is the simplest way to say, in early stage of life, red bone marrow is present everywhere inside the skeleton, inside all the bones. Okay? In early stage. Then what happens when our body grows, the red bone marrow inside the shaft of the long bone. So this is a long bone, like your femur or humerus. Okay, this is a long bone. So in early stage of life, you have red bone marrow everywhere, right? Everywhere inside the bones. Now, gradually what happens, the red bone marrow in the shaft of the long bones becomes fat, one type of fat, and that is called yellow bone marrow, which is actually adipose tissue or fat. But red bone marrow still stays at the ends. Okay, so red bone marrow at the ends of the long bones will never be converted to yellow bone marrow. Make sense? Only the red bone marrow inside the shaft of the long bone will become what? Adipose tissue. That is called yellow bone marrow. So now if I ask you, in adult, where you will find the red bone marrow at the end of the long bones, as well as inside the flat bones, all flat bones. In very early stage of life, everywhere, inside inside the flat bones, inside the long bones, everywhere. Okay, so that's the easiest way to say. Recent studies, experiments have shown that this yellow bone marrow, if your body is in a situation where the red blood cells are, very low and your body needs more red blood cells, some of the yellow bone marrow can be converted back to red bone marrow. But this is just recent studies, okay? And they start to produce blood cells. Okay. Maturation of erythrocytes. After a red blood cell is produced in the bone marrow, initially the red blood cell is large in size, that is big, and a large nucleus is inside. Okay, so this is the early stage of red blood cell. That is called pro-erythroblast. You see this picture at the top? That's the earliest stage of red blood cell. Anybody remember the stem cell of the blood cells? Hemocytoblast. If you go back, so all blood cells come from this. Remember, stem cell, right? Hemocytoblast. So the first is the stem cell. This is the stem cell present in the bone marrow, red bone marrow. That is called hemocytoblast. Okay, stem cell is the hemocytoblast. Then stem cell produces white blood cells, platelets, and red blood cells. Because this is the stem cell for all blood cells. Make sense? So red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, everything will come from the stem cells. We are now talking about the production of red blood cells. So we are talking about this. So from a stem cell, when differentiation will occur, some cells will go this way. And this is the earliest stage of red blood cell. That is the pro-erythroblast coming from the stem cell. And then what happens? Pro-erythroblast goes through a number of stages of maturation. Now, important things here, you see that three important changes occur during the maturation of red blood cell. Number one, the cell size gets smaller. You need to know it. Cell size gets what? Smaller. If you compare the top one and the bottom one, you can tell, right? Cell size is reduced. So reduction of cell size, number one, right? Number two, in early stage, red blood cell has a large what inside? Nucleus, but no hemoglobin. Make sense? In mature red blood cell, do you have nucleus? No, that's why it is flat, remember? So, no nucleus in mature one. But mature one has what? Hemoglobin. But in early stage, nucleus is there, no hemoglobin. So just opposite, right? So now you see here, this one is the early, so it has a large what? nucleus, right? But no hemoglobin. And this one has no nucleus, but hemoglobin. Make sense? Now if I ask you what are the changes occur during maturation, nucleus disappears, right? And who appears? Hemoglobin appears. Make sense? So you see here 3 changes. If I ask you what are the 3 changes during maturation of erythrocyte or red blood cell, cell size gets what? Reduced. Number 1. Make sense? Number 2, who disappears? Nucleus. Who appears? Hemoglobin. So those are 3 changes. Okay. So now you can tell the shape gets flat. When large nucleus is inside, it is spherical, right? When nucleus disappears, flat. Okay. So you see here, the nucleus gradually gets smaller, and at one point it is kicked out, pushed out, ejected, okay, from the cell. Here you see that ejection of nucleus. And then it enters into circulation from the bone marrow. This is the bone marrow, enters into the circulation. Okay. So this is the mature red blood cell. Destruction of red blood cell, the last thing. The lifespan of a red blood cell in circulation is 90 to 120 days. That means 3 to 4 months. 3 to 4 months, right? After that, red blood cells are destroyed. Now, why the lifespan of red blood cell is short? Because it does not have nucleus, right? Nucleus is called the control center of the cell. So a very important component is absent there. So also a few other organelles are absent. So the cell membrane gets very weak after 3 to 4 months, and eventually the red blood cells are ruptured. Cell membranes are destroyed. Make sense? Now, in 2 locations, the red blood cells are mostly destroyed. Most of the red blood cells are destroyed in 2 organs. One is the liver and another is the spleen. Okay? Spleen and liver. And that's why those 2 organs are called the graveyards. Okay? The graveyards for the red blood cells. Okay, so let's stop here since the time is over. We'll start from this slide, next slide, in next class. Okay? Do you have any questions? No question? So what did you learn today? How to define blood, right? What is blood? What type of tissue? Very good. Why it is called special? Liquid. Very good. Why the red blood cells are red? Hemoglobin. Okay, good. So the pH of blood is acidic or alkaline? Slightly alkaline. Very good. So looks like you are
Ready?
getting ready. Good, very good. Okay.
What did you say?
I said it's 30 to 8 minutes.